Are you a parent navigating the complexities of co-parenting, family court, or even domestic violence? If you are looking for ways to help protect your children and build a strong and supportive community around you, then look no further. Gray Minds Think Alike is your go-to resource for everything related to the complexities of family life. Join us as we dive into thoughtful conversations with experts and explore practical tips and strategies for tackling the challenges of parenthood in the throes of adversity so that no parent feels alone and every child's safety is protected. Welcome back to Gray Minds Think Alike, where we dive deep into the conversations that matter most with experts who enlighten, inspire, and empower. Today's episode is about something we talk around often, but don't always slow down enough to truly examine: self-love, grief, and the ways relationships reveal our deepest wounds and greatest opportunities for healing. I'm honored to be joined by Jonathon Aslay, one of America's leading midlife self-love and relationship coaches. What the heck is self-love anyway? And a father whose life was forever changed after the devastating loss of his 19-year-old son. Jonathon's grief led him inward into a profound exploration of love, worthiness, and emotional health, and ultimately reshaped how he understands relationships, date, and healing after divorce or loss. This conversation is for anyone navigating heartbreak, rebuilding after trauma, questioning their patterns in relationships, or wondering how to truly love themselves again, especially when life hasn't gone as planned. Hi, Jonathon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Allie. I'm honored.
Absolutely. I read about you, and I think we have some things in common. Your work took a deeper meaning after the loss of your son. How did grief change the way you understand love? Not just romantic love, but love of self itself and life.
It's interesting to answer that question. I almost have to give a tiny little bit of a backstory to something that prepared me for that. Because about 20 years ago, after turning 40, I turned 40, my now ex-wife asked for a divorce. And at the same time, I lost my high-end corporate job, making a significant six-figure income. And then the market crashed that wiped me out financially. And for a period, things were going really well. And the irony was online dating was my drug of choice to fill the void inside of me. It was like almost an addiction, which eventually led to my now profession. But why I'm bringing this up is going through a significant identity crisis that took me to my knees, that took me to a place of going to bed for almost a year, wishing I didn't wake up. And there's a difference between wanting to end it versus not wanting the pain to go away. And it took me almost a half a decade to recognize that what was going to take the pain to go away, or what I eventually chose, was a deep dive into personal development, self-help, spiritual work, and therapy to really rebuild, to put emotional scaffolding in place so that by the time my son did pass away, I wasn't in a place where I could be devastated, like that can happen to so many parents, because I'd done so much inner work. And what that allowed me to do by the time he transitioned was to say, life can change on a dime. In his particular case, he woke up one morning and he was gone a few hours later.
Was he sick?
No, accident. And so my point is, it can change that quickly. And in that moment, I realized a couple different things. First off, when I was giving his eulogy at the funeral, I stopped in the middle of my speech and I said, look, we can all grieve with suffering, or we can grieve with love. And at the moment, I had no idea what was coming out of my mouth. I was just saying, I do believe we can grieve without the pain, or at least less pain. And I didn't know what that meant in the moment. I just said it. And it allowed me to explore that when we feel more whole within ourselves on an emotional level, when we feel self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence, self-reliance, self-discipline, all these juicy self-words, I was like, okay, this love is the encapsulation of all this self-love. And I began writing my now book called What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway, which is really just 30 plus blogs that I had written in the last year from a dating perspective. And I just tweaked it more from a personal development perspective. And it's my deep desire to make a difference in people's lives by encouraging an inward journey, a self-examined journey, a self-aware journey, a self-responsibility journey, because here in the United States, we are suckling on the nipple of victim consciousness. And it's like everyone else is to blame and without looking in the mirror. And a self-exam in life is the capacity it's like being at a play and you are the actor on the stage, but a self-exam in life is the person in the audience watching everything. And that's what I'm here to encourage, is that separation from what's going on to looking at oneself, one's actions, not from a victim, but from a victor place.
I don't know if you know a little bit about me, but I also lost my son. It happened just like his father killed him in a court-ordered supervision time sharing. And one day I buckled him in the car seat and said goodbye. I'll see you tomorrow at school. He was 4. And that was the last I ever saw him. So I always say that I also died that day because part of me did. And I am not the same person that I was prior. So I'm almost like a brand new person. And I have to learn how to love that person and say goodbye to the old person who I used to love. So for me, it's very hard to love myself when I don't love life, I guess you can say. It's bitter. So it's hard to find that inner peace.
So it's interesting. I knew a little of your backstory, but I didn't know all the granular details. In my particular case, when I lost my identity, it was an opening to work on myself. And as I said earlier, created emotional scaffolding for me. Very few of us get that benefit to work on ourselves, to prepare for some tragedy like what you experienced. And I'm not making a comparison between the two of us, because while some people would think that losing a child is the worst thing that can happen to you, and I will say it is emotionally devastating, but we can also, why I said I grieved with love is because the one thing I know my son never would have wanted is for any of us to suffer. And so I choose that as my guiding light, as my North Star, if you will.
Right. And I do too. Obviously I could have stayed in bed. I could have done all of those things, but I chose to fight. I actually got a law passed here in Florida called Greyson's Law, which is helping other families protect their children. And I started this nonprofit, which I do this podcast
you're doing
for.
The podcast.
So I am doing my best to continue his legacy and actually help others so his death wasn't in vain. So I guess that is a part of what Greyson would have wanted and this love.
I always think of Adam Walsh and what I think back to, that was like 30 or 40 years ago now. But think of how many children are being saved because of your son's loss. I think that's a testament to not just his journey, but your efforts. And again, just even doing this podcast and allowing someone like myself to come on, it's great what you're doing. And that's really, I think the message we're trying to say to most everybody is, we can experience this horrific pain, but we also have an opportunity to really step up beyond that and make a difference in people's lives. And in fact, I would say that in some ways, it changed both of our trajectory in this, so we can make a difference in people's lives. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, this is not the path or the road that I ever would have chosen, but this is what I was dealt. So you said relationships reveal a widespread emotional health issue, lack of self-worth. What do you think so many people, or why do you think so many people, especially after divorce or loss, struggle so deeply with self? Why is it so hard to love yourself?
Very few of us have really had healthy parental role models, and not suggesting that the Ozzie and Harriet type of family existed, but certainly I'm a tail end baby boomer. Even the Gen Xers weren't really modeled the healthiest of parenting, if you will. And many of us experienced childhood wounds and then eventually adult traumas, because I speak to a demographic of people over 45 years old in the dating relationship. 75% of people that are actively dating in that age bracket are divorced. And that's an emotionally traumatic experience. So whether you had a childhood experience that, and let me be clear, when I say childhood wounds, many people think abuse, physical, emotional. I'm talking garden variety, little fucked up shit that our parents did to us they didn't mean to do, but it has an emotional effect on us.
Absolutely.
Couple that with divorce, which is the unraveling of the tapestry of your life with another human being. Many of us operate from a dependent point of view.
Right.
And what happens is we think, the next relationship, that's going to solve it.
Yeah.
And what happens is you realize that no, it's about looking in the mirror to work work on oneself. And so dating and relationships trigger, I believe the number one emotional health wound is I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable. I'm not likable. This is my verbiage. I'm not saying this by any statistics.
I mean, I would say people have lower self-esteem after failure, which I guess what divorce is. Maybe not personal failure, but the end or resolution of a marriage.
No, I'm glad you made that distinction because truthfully, some people look at it as a failure and it's just simply an ending. There is gold if you decide to go mining for the gold. Right. And that is, what positive things did I learn about myself in this marriage? What was good about the marriage? What was not so good about the marriage? How have I healed? There's some gold if there's a self-examination.
Especially because it opens the door for a new relationship that might be the right one, the better choice.
Yeah. Sadly, though, divorces happen at a higher rate the second and third time around because honestly, we humans do a very poor job of learning from our experiences. We're just looking for the next fix. And I think sadly, these little smartphone devices has created this constant need for dopamine where very few people really get the benefit of serotonin-based love. We're just so addicted to dopamine-based love.
Right. And that's what dating apps do, right? You have instant connection to people that you don't know. Are you for or against?
I met my beloved through a dating app, so I'm going to be for it. I do believe most people enter into, this is a great tool to meet people you wouldn't otherwise meet in your daily life.
Sure.
But just like anything, the operator makes the decisions, the person and sadly, we've been indoctrinated to believe that chemistry equals relationship success. And coming back to that dopamine need, that's where the disconnect with the apps, but it's still a great tool like anything else.
Oh, absolutely. I always said, because I used to use them when I lived in New York, I used to say, unless someone's going to appear at my front door, I'll never meet them. Because when I lived in New York City, I worked late and went right home and I watched TV and I just wouldn't have met people.
Were you actually in Manhattan?
Was, yes.
And it's interesting because of all the cities, you actually have an environment where you can actually physically be around people.
Yeah,
when I live in Los Angeles, I have to drive wherever I want to go. It's not a walk. Right. Of all the cities, it's still one of the best places to be because of proximity. And yet, look at how daunting and challenging it is.
It's actually harder to meet people in New York City, which is, like you said, fascinating. It's because, one, there are so many options.
Yeah.
There are too many options that when you meet someone online, they already have 4 other meetups that scheduled that same day. So you're just one of many. And it's just
So here's an interesting share that your audience might appreciate. So I'm in a significant relationship actually at the end of this week that we're recording this, we're moving in together. And we've been together for not quite a year yet.
Congrats.
Thank you. And our first telephone call, we end up getting on the phone. About an hour into the call, we realized we had mutual friends. So we're like, oh my God, you're friends with them? And I'm talking close friends, not like some social media friend. And so we got together for a meet. I don't call the first time you meet someone a date. I call it a meeting. I say that to take the pressure off of expectations. We had a 5-hour meeting. We had a great time, but there was no chemistry for both of us. And so 2 days later, we were like, so she called me up. What do you think, Jonathan? I'm like, I got to be honest. I'm neutral. And she goes, I'm neutral too. We end up spending 5 hours on the phone, like going, what the heck is that? We check all these boxes. We get along great. We have we had this great time. And over the next 10, we just talked every day like we were 2 good friends. And then we woke up 10 days later. I'm like, I really like you. And she goes, I really like you. And I like you. Like the chemistry started to build. And then we eventually met and we're now happily together. Most humans aren't familiar with calm connection. We're so indoctrinated that it has to be butterflies, it has to be excitement, it has to be skyrockets and fireworks.
Sometimes it's your best friend that you realize, wow, I'm in love with my best friend.
Yeah. And if 2 people are experiencing, this is the best kind of relationships out there.
Sure.
And sadly, coming back to the New York environment, and by the way, I saw the movie The Materialist, and it really fascinated me, the dynamics in New York, because I believe it to be relatively true. Rarely do we slow down enough in the process of getting to know someone from a heart-centered level. It seems like we rush attraction, entertainment, romance, and physical connection without really building intellectual and emotional connection before the physical starts. And that's where a lot of hangups reside.
Absolutely. I have been with my partner for 6 years now, and I didn't meet him on a dating app, but it turns out that we're both from the same city, went to rival high schools, and I actually hired him to teach my son how to swim because he was a swim instructor.
Yeah.
So I always say that Greyson brought us together. Yeah. Okay, so going back to all the fun stuff. So like dating after divorce. I know for a lot of people it's hard, confusing, or even like re-traumatizing because people don't want to go through it again.
Yeah.
But what is the one thing that you think that people should understand maybe about themselves before they start dating?
About my first reaction to that question is ideally have it be clean with your previous partner to some degree.
Sure.
And in many cases, that may not be clean, but I think it really is a benefit to clean as possible with your previous partner. But that's not always possible the case. So to answer your question, coming back to that self-examination, if you have fear, past hurts, or a fantasy about a future relationship, those are going to be some big stumbling blocks. If you have fear, past hurts, or fantasy.
I feel like everyone has all of that.
Yeah. And so your desire, your capacity, and your vision for a relationship has to exceed the fear, the pain, the fantasy. And the word capacity is the keystone in that word, capacity. Most human beings have weak emotional maturity, poor relationship skills. And everybody that's hearing this is saying, but I'm the exception to what you just said, Jonathon. And I'm here to say, everyone who thinks that, you are the rule, not the exception. Most of us have poor emotional maturity and weak relationship skills. This is why I'm such a big proponent of doing the inner work to improve communication skills, to improve one's capacity to regulate their nervous system, to learn good conflict resolution skills, to be in relationship these days. First off, relationships is not for the faint of heart. If you're just cavalierly going in it, trust me, you're going to most likely have a lot of emotional distress. But today's relationship almost requires ninja level skills, and very few people are trained at this level.
Absolutely. It does take work. The benefits have to outweigh the work, I guess you could say, which everyone, even the happiest of marriages, it's always a give and take.
It's interesting. You brought up something, work, and I'm in full agreement. So given that most couples' greatest challenge is genuine emotional intimacy, I believe that one of the things on your checklist is, look, once we start, if we decide to explore a relationship together, then let's put personal development, counseling, therapy as part of our plan to build a healthy relationship. And if someone has resistance over that, trust me, if you have resistance now, that resistance is going to be tenfold once you need the help. Like, it's starting with the right work. I'm a big believer of starting before you even have a problem. It's like recognizing the potholes before you get on the road. Most people are so naive about it. They're so caught up in the fantasy of love that they're not prepared for the real challenges of conflict resolution, being there for one another. That's building real, genuine trust through emotional safety.
So even if we do the work for ourselves before a relationship, which is probably when you need to do it, and then you enter a relationship and that person has not done the work, how do you get them on board to maybe get that conflict resolution in play? Like maybe therapy or some sort of...
I believe, and Lewis Howes is a very famous podcaster with the School of Greatness, and he talks about his now relationship before they got married. And one of his must-haves he brought up to his partner, or the person he was dating at the time, Martha. He said, look, therapy is part of our process of getting to know one another. Do you have a problem with that? And she said, I love it. The same thing goes to a woman saying that to a guy. If they have resistance to, then they probably lack open-mindedness. And now, I got some bad news for most people. And 8 out of 10 people will say no to it because they're naive. Yeah. But trust me, you're rolling the dice with those 8 people. Maybe you might, because open-mindedness is the most important thing. They may never have done personal development, self-help, spiritual work, or therapy, but if they're closed-minded, that's going to be, I guarantee you're rolling the dice with that person. The open-minded person who's never done anything is at least the one that I would take the gamble with.
I agree. I always say that it's never going to hurt trying to better yourself unless you know that you have a lot of work to do, a lot of inner work to do. And then it's just recognizing that and agreeing to start that process.
Do you remember earlier, Allie, when I said people are in victim consciousness? I would venture to say 8 out of 10 people that are divorced blame their previous partner for the reason for the end of the marriage. And take no ownership on their part.
No accountability. Yep.
That's the fastest clue to recognize who's worth investing in.
Are there early warning signs that someone is in the wrong relationship? What should people pay attention to, I guess, early on?
That's a great question. And someone just messaged me on social media and I was reflecting upon this. So our body gives us so many clues. And I'm thinking back to a personal circumstance where prior to meeting my beloved, briefly in a relationship, and great first date, a lot of fun. But I woke up the next morning and for some reason, I was just like, the no that was coming out of my body was like clear. And so I sabotaged our next date. And then because I was
consciously or subconsciously,
I think it was subconscious.
Right.
And then I realized, but this was the fascinating piece.
Right.
So then I went completely into damage control, going to the opposite of begging for forgiveness because I said something jackass. So then I was trying to repair this subconscious. My body was telling me no, but I'm like, okay. So then I went into repair mode and then we started to see each other. And for the brief time that we were together, which was about 6 weeks, my body was like constantly like a pachinko ball. It was like all over the place. I wasn't feeling calm. I wasn't feeling safe. And by the way, she did nothing wrong. So
you're just uneasy.
And what it was, we were two people. We were like a frequency that was misaligned. She was like, I'm at AM 590 and she's at FM 10 or something. And by the way, it's okay that there's these differences, but my body, my agitation was screaming to me. I just didn't know how to listen because when you can hear the disconnect and you know what, it's simply a misalignment. You don't need to this is just a misalignment. It's okay to say, hey, I think you're a wonderful person. We're misaligned. It's probably best that we don't move on. But we don't know how to listen to our intuition, our body. And usually our body, by the way, I'm talking about here, okay, right at this is speaking to us all the time, but we do a terrible job of listening. Our ego gets in the way. Our hormones get in the way because we don't know how to operate logically and that, by the way, that's where the first 90 days needs to be. Be more in your head than your heart or your hormones. But we go straight to hormones and heart and we bypass the logic that's screaming at us.
Now, do you believe in attachment styles? Because I used to study them because I was just so fascinated by how different people have different attachment styles. You have the anxious heart, the open heart, the everything in between. One's always the mouse chasing and one's self-confident. I believe that those sort of styles affect whether or not your relationship will work.
I've studied attachment theory. I subscribe to a majority of it. The challenge with it is that from a lot of people don't really practice the tools necessary. So if you're an anxious person and you're with an avoidant, first off, avoidant people rarely, first off, they struggle with emotional intimacy. They're emotionally constipated. They're emotionally unavailable. So right off the bat, if they're not willing to examine their heart, you're already in trouble. That's the clue. So then now there's
I don't know if that avoidants know that they're avoidant.
Exactly. So then, and they, by the way, everybody who does the survey, they do the online test, everybody.
I did that test.
This is the fantasy because people project who they are. If an anxious person knows who they are and they studies the tools and the processes within the anxious person, anxious people are more inclined to examine themselves.
Right. They know something's not right.
If you have an avoidant who's actually aware, that reads the books, that does the work, then an anxious and avoidant person can eventually build secure love. Now, I don't believe the percent, I believe most of the authors of the primary books along the lines of attachment theory believe that 50% of the population is secure. I think that's a crock of shit. I think they are so misaligned because it's a self-examine tool anyway. You're not going to get accuracy. I believe most humans have a default of anxious or avoidant. Okay. And I'm not talking about the subclasses within the two. So really boils down to, do you grab the 3 primary books that have been written, Attached by Amir Levine, Rachel Held, Wired for Love by Dr. Stan Takton, Learning Love by Thais Gibson. Grab those 3 books and make that part of your dating process.
Yeah. I used to study them. I don't know if it...
And by the way, if 2 people are deciding to explore a relationship, if you haven't bought the book 8 Dates by Drs. John and Julie Gottman and the 7 Principles for Making a Marriage Work, and you can just replace the word marriage with relationship, those aren't in your... If that isn't part of your dating process, I guarantee your likelihood of success diminishes tenfold if this isn't part of your process. Now, I'm not saying you won't have a successful relationship, but boy, if you want to improve your odds, learn this shit so you can be better at relationship.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you want to have the best life ever?
Well, you just said, why wouldn't you? Right. Humans are delusional. We are in fantasy. Remember I said fear, past hurts, and fantasy. Most everybody, a lot of men let me just be clear about men in general for the listeners. Okay. By the way, can I curse? I already did.
You can do whatever you want.
Look, men are fucking clueless. Women have been indoctrinated that the man's supposed to climb to the highest room of the tallest tower, and men are the leaders of relationship. If they're such fucking good leaders of relationship, why are women miserable? Ladies, you're giving the job to the wrong person. Now, with that said, ladies, you require a big amount of self-responsibility too, because you always blame men for everything. And it takes 2 humans.
They're driving us crazy.
Yeah. So you can already tell I get amped up when I get into these parts of the conversation. So it's not obvious to people. We were never trained this. Sure. Now, my son has been indoctrinated this because I fed him all this stuff when he was 14 years old, and he's better prepared at 29, my other son. And so he's radically aware. And most people that are baby boomers and Gen Xers, they're still rather clueless and in fantasy.
Now, before I move on, I just have a quick question from my own knowledge. Did your son pass away and then you got divorced, or were you getting a divorce first?
No, I got a divorce 20 years ago, went through my identity crisis. Then he passed away, 13 years later.
So you were already divorced?
Yeah, I'd already been divorced.
Okay.
And
I'm just curious if that affected that relationship, which obviously loss does.
Actually, the divorce, it took me about a half a decade to be more of a conscious father. I was going through a lot of emotional turmoil. As I said earlier, I went to bed wishing I didn't wake up. It wasn't until about 2013, he passed away in 2018, where I began living a way more examined life. I did the Hoffman process. I did Insight Institute. I did therapy. I did Tony Robbins. I did neuro-linguistic programming. I have over 3,000 hours of personal development workshops and training. Plus, being a coach allowed me to perfect communication skills. But no, and honestly, and I'm grateful, my relationship with both my boys, while tenuous for the first half of the divorce, began improving 10 years in. And thankfully, I have a really great relationship with my son.
Yeah, you're lucky that you had a lot of that foundation in yourself to deal with that grief. I didn't. And a lot of that work was post my son's death, which is a lot harder. But
best man in his wedding also lost my best man in my wedding 3 years ago lost his son. And I've witnessed being a support person to him. And he found a spiritual path. He and his wife now found a spiritual path as their foundation for this. Yes, I was blessed in the sense that I had built a foundation emotionally beforehand. But I also look at, sadly, it takes humbling events for humans to make a choice. It'd be great if we didn't have to be hit with a 2x4 or have a 9.0 earthquake happen in our lives. But in many cases, sadly, for a lot of people, drugs, alcohol, and other outlets are their replace to the inner work. But like what you're doing, and by the way, I suspect What year did your son pass?
2021.
2021. It's fascinating to me. I'm 8 years ahead of you in this case, 7.5. Sadly, find out so many young people who die. Like now it's in my vortex the way I see white Teslas in Los Angeles all day long. What's been a blessing is that they come to me, and I suspect they come to you, particularly now that you're in a platform where you actually are making a gigantic difference. I was going to say it's a blessing and a curse, but it's not a curse. It's a blessing to be able to be of support to other people in this regard. And I suspect for you, look at what you're doing. You changed a law in your state. Fucking, that is just awesome.
Yeah. A law that would kept my son alive.
Yeah.
And it was common sense. It's just common sense. That's what it takes. Tragedy for common sense to exist. It's insane.
It's sad. And yet this is the evolution of our humanity. I do believe we're going to go through a lot more alliterations of change. And that's what we're here to do in this incarnation that we're here. Thankfully, you've taken a real painful experience and made a difference in so many people's lives. Like you said earlier, in some ways, you thank your son for this too.
Only for him, right?
Yeah.
It's really only for him. So let's talk about your book. So your book title asks the questions that people wonder. What the heck is self-love? So how do you define self-love in a way that goes beyond bubble baths, affirmations, and staring in a mirror and just giving a mantra? What is it?
That's a great question because a lot of people look at self-care like bubble baths, massages.
That's part of it, for sure.
Self-care is a part of it. In other words, certainly our body is a machine. And one of the chapters is our body is a machine and taking really good care of it versus the idolization of our body as a temple. I look at it as a machine. And if we take good care of the machine, it's going to last longer. So I shared that prior to writing the book, I'd been blogging about what self-love means from a dating perspective. And so there are 30 really short chapters on a change of perspective. For example, chapter 1 is speak your truth, do it from a kind place, as an example. In honor of my son, there's some sprinkles in there. There's a chapter in there, don't let anyone F with your chi, because he had an interesting way of not letting other people's opinions of him bother him. So he's peppered throughout the book. There's
What's
a chapter. His name's Connor.
Connor.
And there's another chapter, if it's sincere and from the heart, you can't say the wrong thing to the right person. In other words, when you're coming from a heart-centered place, and that's a particular chapter in the book that I encourage, particularly my female clientele. Many people are afraid to speak their truth to their partner for fear of abandonment. And I'm here to say, your partner is the person you can share your deepest, darkest fears and insecurities. If they're the right person, that they're not going to run away. They're going to embrace it even deeper. So that's the way the book is laid out. And let me just say this, self-love, to make it easier for those people that resist the self-love, let me make it really easier. Self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence, self-reliance, self-discipline, all these juicy self-words is just wrapped up in the heart of love. And that's what self-love represents. And
it's like from Saturday Night Live, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and people like.
And for the record, for everyone listening, let me just say this: it's a journey. It's not a destination. It perfectly loves themselves. It's narrative. Even I used to talk about you have to love yourself to be a love another.
Yeah.
It's that you're loving yourself. It's not that you reach the destination, that you're in the practice of it. That's what matters most.
And you're not settling. You're listening to self also, I believe.
Interesting. I just wrote a blog. I had to settle to fall in love, but I had to settle down, not settle.
Right.
The idea was to settle down.
Yeah, that's different.
Fantasy. I had to settle down the projections. I had to settle all those down, settle the ego down, and really operate from a heart-centered place.
You got to do work. So I guess after a relationship ends, especially one that was tied to trauma or betrayal, people often feel broken. What is a practical self-love practice or technique that someone can apply immediately after a breakup or divorce?
Yeah, that's a great question. So coming back to self-examination, if you look at every part of it that you take ownership on your part of the ending. And now some people love to point the finger. I was with a narcissist. I was with an abusive person. I was with an alcoholic, all those things. And I get that exists. But taking at least 3% ownership and making that 3% 100%. In other words, and what I mean to say is really take ownership on your part and then examine, what did I learn from this experience? Okay. Now I'm calling the word relationship experience. Okay. What did I learn from this experience? How have I healed myself? What was good about the experience? What was not good about the experience? And lastly, what are you most grateful for? If you can answer those 5 questions, really sit in gratitude for the experience, for the relationship, then you're going to walk away so better prepared. But here's what most people do. They point the finger at the other person. They become jaded, bitter, tainted, angry, and they're living in that energy that is so dense that until that becomes the light of love. Yeah, you might get a new relationship, but I guarantee you it's going to be a different version. It's going to be the same thing with a different head on it.
There are different phases of, like they say, there's different stages, different phases of grief. You have your angry, your denial, then whatnot. And then the 6th one is making meaning. So I'm sure the same thing is true with relationships when they end. You go through, you're angry and then calm down a little. And then you go through acceptance and things like that. And it morphs into, hopefully, something more peaceful for both sides.
It's interesting. You would think you and I know this by heart, but for whatever reason, I think it's denial, bargaining, anger. I think depression is in there with grief. And
acceptance.
I think acceptance being in there.
And then making meaning.
And making meanings. The sooner people arrive to acceptance and making meaning is when you're preparing yourself for the capacity to be in a new relationship. Otherwise, what's the definition of insanity, which most people do? They do the same thing over and over again, expecting, somehow magic fairy dust is going to change the results. And magic fairy dust doesn't exist, folks.
No. And a lot of this happens for generational, right? You see what your parents do or how they handled certain relationships and their capacity of love and how you were raised. That sort of goes down to you and then you pass it to your children. So how does modeling self-love impact our children's emotional health and future relationships, their future marriages?
It's interesting. For the last 2 weeks, I've been binge watching the show Mad Men.
I just finished it yesterday for the second
time. I just finished it 3 days ago. So there's some irony here.
Amazing.
So what's interesting about that show, which was produced almost 20 years ago, or began about 18 years
2005,
ago.
I think.
Oh, okay. So So what's interesting is set in the 1960s, and it's an interesting microcosm to those of us who are baby boomers or even Gen Xers. What we as the children in the show, we didn't experience it. It's, again, New York was a unique microcosm of what was going on.
I was born in New York. I grew up in New York.
But for those that grew up in Dallas, Alabama, the Midwest, and that sort of thing, probably had a slightly different. But the point, coming back to generational trauma, there's an interesting through line for the parents in the show of what they experienced growing up and how they passed it on to their children, and those children became us. I was just having this conversation with my beloved literally an hour before we began recording, and I was talking about how I really didn't have a relationship with my father. And we were talking about a scene in the show where the father takes his son to the movies. I had kind of quasi-relationship. My son and I have an excellent relationship together. So my point in bringing this up, my dad had almost no relationship with his dad. I doubt his dad had a relationship. I had a tiny bit of a relationship, and the generation is improving upon that connection.
So do you think Sally's just fucked Sally Draper?
It's interesting because I talk about she's going to be a chick that has daddy issues like up the yin. And she's going to be, so she will be roughly about 67 years old right now, 68 years old in today's timeline. And I guarantee you she's had a string of men in her life, maybe possibly a marriage in there. And I don't want to spoil the show, but at least at the end, he does some work on himself. So that's an interesting.
This is the second time I watched it, and I completely forgot. I watched it when it was on real time, and I knew I loved it. I actually worked at Gray Advertising, and I'm in advertising. I majored in advertising. So for me, and I'm from New York. So for me, it was just, everything was so spot on. And then when I just rewatched it, it reaffirmed how amazing that show is. And yes, the relationships between them all and just the generation.
So for those listening to this right now who have never seen the Mad Men series, it's 7 seasons. But why I recommend it, and there's another show I want to recommend that's contemporary. What's interesting, I'll share it in a second because I want to tell this to everybody. Again, what Allie and I are talking about is the human behavior and the emotional development of the characters, and to really sit with it from an objective point of view, not making him out to be the bad person because he's a philanderer and all that sort of thing. What's an interesting characterization today is the show Nobody Wants This on Netflix,
which I watched as
with Adam Brody and Kristen Bell. And what's interesting interesting about that and why I'm bringing this up is they are role modeling healthy communication. They're role modeling friendship. They're role modeling conflict resolution. She's even sharing her anxiety with him in the first couple episodes. And I'm not running away from you yet. Why I like that show so much, and I think it's so popular, is that when we get to the granular emotions of what people are feeling, these particular shows, again, if we can look outside of the objective point of view and really think of it from a human behavior perspective, what we need more role models like the show Nobody Wants This, but we need it in real time. And so I'm going to be sharing this with your audience right now, but my beloved and I, beginning in the next 2 months, we're going to sit on camera. She's going to join me on my YouTube channel. I've been doing YouTube for a decade now and blessed to have a couple 100,000 subscribers, but I'm bringing her on. And I was just talking to her about it today because what we don't have is good role models. We have some good role models like the Guns or Gay and Catherine Hendricks, just to name a few, but to really role model relationship communication skills. And I want everyone who's listening right now is when we are able to express ourselves, express our emotions, our feelings, our fears, our insecurities, our negative patterns, our limiting beliefs, when we can identify it within ourselves and then express it to another human being in ways that you can be seen, heard, and understood, because we humans are great at doing it from a conflicted point of view instead of a heart-centered point of view. I think that's going to change once there's more role models demonstrating healthy communication.
Sure.
And we're still in the infancy of this, but I want to be a leader in this area.
Absolutely. I love that show too for many reasons. One, I'm Jewish and I've dated non-Jews and it's always a thing. Which also brings a point where I don't know how realistic it is because I have never met a rabbi that would be a non-Jewish girl, but I'm happy it exists.
It'll be interesting how they evolve the characters. I think, again, this is TV and
and both the first and second seasons had it leaves you with the same ending. Is this going to work?
Yeah. And by the way, but it really illustrates that relationships come with differences.
Absolutely.
And thankfully, what you don't see in Nobody Wants This, unlike Mad Men, you saw fighting, you saw argumentative behavior, which gets us nowhere. With Nobody Wants This, disagreements that they evolved the communication to work around. Now, they might have an irreconcilable difference in the show. That might be a deal breaker for them. I think they'll find a way to make it work, which isn't as realistic, but at least we're moving in the right direction about healthy communication skills. And if nothing else,
you can actually see the evolution through Mad Men to today, present day, and just the times have changed.
Yeah, it's interesting how I binged watch about 6 months ago, Friends, and thinking about the evolution of television over the years from that Friends or Mad Men to today.
Right.
And to the extent that I love Nobody Wants This I love that. And I'm going to share this with everybody, and I'm bringing this to your audience attention. As much as I can't stand reality TV, I like some of the principal ideas in the show Love is Blind.
Okay.
And let me explain.
A couple seasons. I watched a couple of seasons of it.
And why I'm bringing this up is it's an interesting experiment that you're in a silo together for at least 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And you're fully committed to the exploration.
Conversation.
Exactly. Now, again, these are a lot of wannabe influencers that end up on the show and they're not really, I'd like to see more of an elder demographic balance over the rest. But why I'm bringing this up is when we actually are intentional in the early stage of getting to know one another, what you really want to do is fail fast. Okay. If you're going to fail fast.
Right.
Okay. And within 3 weeks of this, basically within 5 weeks, you either shit or get off the pot.
Right.
I am here to promote not that you fail fast isn't the goal, but boy, if you're going to fail, do it as quick as possible versus
don't waste time.
Yeah. And today's dating is really just friends with benefits and nobody knows it. That's what dating has turned into.
I agree. When I did internet dating, I would know instantly if I had a connection or not, and I wouldn't even dabble in a further text or email because I was like, I don't even want to waste anyone's time.
Yes, but I'm going to make an argument. If I had followed that, I need a connection. I would have missed out on the most amazing relationship in my life. Because what I didn't pay attention to was we had intellectual chemistry, we had emotional chemistry, we had spiritual chemistry. I just got caught up in the whole fantasy about the physical part. And we have the best sex we've ever had. We both profess the most amazing physical relationship with one another because we developed those other three areas first.
Right. Now, I don't want to talk too much about TV because I know we have to wrap up, but I will just say I just watched the 20-year, 30-year, I don't know, reunion of Everybody Loves Raymond.
Okay.
They were showing clips throughout the show. And what I just love about that show is how realistic their arguments were. And between Ray and his wife, Deborah, and the parents, the in-laws, the brother, the family dynamics.
Yeah.
Everything in it was just so real and raw that even if they fought, the TV couple fought on the show, there was real love behind it, even though this is a scripted show, obviously.
Yeah, sure.
But it was really funny, really great.
Yeah, you could take any of those shows, King and Queens, even Roseanne and such like that. And what they drew attention to is the real challenges most people face. And if nothing else, and I'm glad you brought this up because I didn't touch upon that, is that this is the real shit. We're going to have differences, okay? That's the reality. This fantasy we live in that we're just going to find this perfect clone and it's going to be juicy love like Prince Charming, love ever after, is a fantasy. So go in knowing that your relationships are going to have potholes. You have a choice. Do you want to navigate those potholes before you jump on the bandwagon of fantasy? Or are you going to say, hey, look, I know they exist. Let's be grown-ups about this. And let's have people in our lives that we can turn to help us navigate this stuff. And that's why I admire Lewis Howes for being so prolific about it, sharing with he wanted to build the connection before the physical part. And not that, by the way, not that you need to do that. Everybody's on their own journey, but boy, when you go in more aware, your feet are on the ground a lot more.
100% agree. Now, just to wrap up, do you love yourself?
Okay, let me tell you why I'm laughing. It's a work in progress for me. Okay. I am fascinated. And I do a lot of psychedelic therapy to really get granular in facets of my life. And it fascinates me how many times I don't. And at the same time, I do genuinely believe that I'm a work in progress. And I'm certainly a lot farther along now than I was 20 years ago. That I can tell you. But I'm not at the destination yet. I think I'll figure that out about 7 seconds before I transition to my next evolution.
Yeah. Everyone, I guess, is always a work in progress. We are at our truly best, right? I'm better today than I was yesterday, hopefully.
But the fact that you can ask that question of me and I can actually examine it from not just a logical point of view, but from an emotional point of view, I think that's the invitation for everybody is to look at, I'm really a big proponent of a self-examine life on an emotional level and revel in it's so funny. I said this to my beloved today. I revel in my dysfunctionality. And what I mean to say is my fears, my insecurities, the parts of me that I'm like, oh my God, why are you going there? And I revel in it from a place of curiosity, not
my worst qualities are probably my best qualities.
Exactly.
I agree. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation and having you on. And these are topics that really can go into any kind of relationship or situation because
absolutely,
all in all, we all need to work on ourselves before anything that we come to in life. So I look forward to chatting again.
Thank you, Allie. I've been honored to be on your show.
Sounds good. I'll talk soon.
Bye now.
If there's someone that you want to hear from on this podcast, please feel free to send me an email. Or if you would like to be a guest, please reach out at Allie@Greyson'sChoice.org. If you would like to continue to hear our podcast, please consider donating at Greyson'sChoice.org. Any amount helps to fund our mission to help protect our children.